Last week, we left off, we're in chapter 34 of Shemot, which is also known as Exodus. We left off with verse 15, which said, "Lest you slaughter a covenant with the dwellers of the land," because they were warned about making covenants in the previous verse, "lest you slaughter a covenant with the dwellers of the land, and they are unfaithful, and you go after their gods and slaughter to their gods and call to you, and they call to you," if I recall right, I left a word out, "and you eat from their slaughter." This issue actually came up this week, and I didn't think to say something about this last week, so I don't know if I'm going to teach today or we're going to talk about some things that I think we need to start thinking about. They were told to be careful who they made a covenant with in the previous verse, because they're leaving Egypt. They've had the Sinai experience. The law has been, or kind of in this case, is still being given, but it's been given. The tablets and all that stuff have been written on, and God is warning these people that where you're about to go is a place where these people don't know the real God. Now, they think they know the real God, and it's let's put it in modern terms. They put up Christmas trees and they put lights around those trees, and they put Santa Claus and baby Jesus wrapping paper around their gifts that they buy for each other, and that's supposed to represent the gifts that were brought to their God, and and on and on and on. You're going into a place like this. I'm trying to make this modern for you, like I said. So when you enter into a place like this, it's not that you can't have covenant with them. It's not that you can't do business with them. It's not that you can't be related to them. It's not that you can't blah, blah, blah. It's just that you have to be careful, because they may not be faithful. Now, it says they're unfaithful, but saying they may not be faithful. In other words, they might not live according to the way you live. Maybe they work on Saturday and take Sunday off as their day of rest. Maybe they don't have a problem with eating pork, and on it goes, right? Because there's a very real possibility that where you're going, they're not going to live the way you do. And so when you get together with these people, you're going to have to be careful to what degree that you're going to interact with these people. And that's what we've been talking about for the last several sentences, and what this verse was talking about. You've got to be careful. And so then when we look at the next verse, it says, "And to take you," this is literal English, "and to take you from daughters his," it's really its, because it's speaking of the land, the dwellers in the land, "take from its daughters, to sons you, for your sons, and unfaithful they, daughters, and the daughters of that place, that dwelling place, are unfaithful." In other words, they're not faithful to God. It doesn't mean that they're going to go around sleeping around on the husbands. That's not what they're talking about. It's just saying that these people are unfaithful. Why? Because they're not living the way you're supposed to be living. They're not living according to God's law. That's unfaithful. Any way you slice it, if you're saying I'm living by grace and not the law, you're unfaithful in God's eyes. And so this is what we're looking at. This is what we're talking about. People who do live by God's law and people who do not. This is the subject. So it's saying you wind up taking the sons to your daughters. It's not telling you that you can't allow your sons to marry these daughters. It's telling you got to be careful, because those daughters may not be faithful to the same God. They may not live the law the way you're supposed to live the law. And even if they do live the law, they may not live it to the degree that you live it, right? Because I'm trying to bring this all into a conversation that I have with 2 or 3 people every single year. You know, I mean, it's not, I'm not pointing anybody out. I'm not saying anybody's wrong. We're looking for clarification. And I'm going to try to get you guys, the listener, involved in the clarification. Because I don't honestly have the answer. At least not all of it. I mean, I have some of it, but I don't have all of it. And so we're going to talk about this, I think. So in case the women are not faithful to your God, like you know you're supposed to be, and and the daughters of those the dwellers, you know, daughters of the dwelling, of the people in the dwelling place, after their gods, you know, they're going after their gods, and they cause unfaithfulness in your sons, because your sons marry them, and it doesn't matter how smart your son is, he may go and worship their gods. Solomon did that. That's what nearly drove the man insane. It certainly brought a lot of unhappiness in his home, because he compromised his beliefs. He compromised what he knew to be right and gave in to what he knew to be wrong in order to keep the peace in his house. And all it brought was utter insanity in his home. Because the next thing you know, he's writing, vanity, vanity, everything's vanity. I mean, he was just on the brink of insanity over this. So unless your sons then become unfaithful, the sons you after God's there and go after their gods. Oh, well, what if they don't go worshiping their gods? You can still go after somebody else's God without worshiping it. So let's take a look at this. Our first word is vela kachta. And that's and take to you. And this is the word that you get the idea of sticking together like glue. It actually, that's in the explanation, to take, to stick together, to adhere. Sounds like glue, right? And it should. To take for oneself, especially to take a wife, which in this case it will be, but when Moshe took the stones, it was the same word. So it's the word, think of it as take, because it's really what you're doing. But in this case, it will be to take a wife. So anyway, then we have mi benotai, from daughters his. So this is starting off with, and to take you. And then it says, literally, daughters his, or daughters its, the daughters of this place we're talking of. And it is the daughters. It's the maidens, the young women who are of marrying age, unless you take for yourself a wife. This is leva necha, for your sons. Maybe I should talk about that, because we're going back. This law was given thousands of years ago, not a couple of years ago. And back in that time period, one of the things that was very common, it was not a law set in stone. It was not something that this absolutely, if it wasn't done this way, then somebody's lying. No, this is just the most common way it was done. A man would decide that his son is ready to be married. And that was totally up to the father to make that decision, because in their world, the father reigns supreme. The mother did not run the household. There were no women wearing the pants, if you will, like we say today. That did not exist in their time period. Not in Jewish culture, not in Chaldean culture. Yes, you can find some of that in the Egyptian culture of the time. They even had women that were, can you call a woman a king? Because technically she is the king, right? Even if they call her a queen. But anyway, however that works out, I don't know. This new age of political correctness confuses me. So we'll just call her the king. But they had the Egyptian king women, right? And they ruled the roost. And that was fine. That's what their culture did. But in this culture, in this Mesopotamia culture, the man reigned supreme. He made the decisions. If they got a divorce, the kids probably stayed with the man, because in those days they believed that the children were better off with the father. They didn't buy into that stuff about children being better off with the mother, which is nonsense, by the way. They're not better off with either or. I mean, that just depends on the circumstances, right? If dad's crazy as a loon and mom's pretty straight, lives her life on an even keel and all that, they are better off with mom. But if it's the other way around, they're better off with dad. Just saying, just throwing that in there. But so anyway, in this time period, among these people, the father would make the decision when the son was ready to be a man. And no, it did not happen automatically when he was 13 and was bar mitzvah. That came much later in time. It was not happening in this time period. The father decided that the son is old enough, it's time for him to have a wife, and then he would do something like send a servant to go find a wife for the son, or he would show up at somebody's door. Hello, hey, notice you got a young maiden in your house. Is she taken? You know, they didn't freak out. Oh, you're too old. Because in their world, they pretty much knew that if an old man was knocking on the door, he was looking for a wife for his son, right? I mean, I'm sure there were exceptions to the rule, like in, what's that? Fiddler on the Roof. But it would have been an exception to the rule, not the rule. Anywho. So the father would send somebody to get a wife for the son, right? Now, if the son grew up, you know, his best friend was the girl next door. And of course, that could be 5 miles down the road in their world, but no, anyway. If it was the girl next door, they probably will pick each other, and that'll be fine with the parents. But it's not the way it went most of the time, as far as we can tell. Most of the time, it was a father sending somebody to go find a wife for his son. And I would contend, I would throw out there that parents are in a better position to pick mates for their children than their children are. Just throwing that out there. There would come a time when a child is mature enough and old enough and wise enough in the world to be able to pick someone for themselves. But for the most part, children are called children because they are children. Just saying. All right, so where were we? Then it says Vezanu, and unfaithful they. So the worry here is that somebody goes and picks a wife for their son, whether it's done by the father himself or it's done through an agent. Doesn't really matter, because the worry is, what if you pick a woman who is not going to be faithful to your God? You're taking that chance. And there's another verse that we can think of, train up the child in the way they ought to go. And when they're older, they will not depart from this. Well, that works in every culture, not just God's. So if a child is raised up putting, lights on a Christmas tree, and in their day, let's go backwards a little ways, in their day, throwing their firstborn child in a fire, they're going to think that's the way to go when they get older. And so even if they're on board for a little bit while with the whole Jewish thing, getting a day off one day a week, which no other culture was getting that I know of. I mean, maybe there was, but not that I know of off the top of my head. But, there would have been some real advantages here. What? You mean I'm not going to be raped by every other man in the village at least once a week? This isn't bad, so they jump on board. Well, before you know it, they're like, well, how come we can't put lights on the trees? How come we can't get together and have our meals? Are we not having these same issues today? Yes, we are. And it's not just one person or two persons. It's a lot of persons, because we grew up in a world where, as kids, we all learned about baby Jesus. Everybody believes in baby Jesus. I don't care if you're an atheist. You grew up with baby Jesus if you grew up in America. And you don't have a problem believing in baby Jesus. You don't have a problem with baby Jesus unless you just are mad at your parents and call yourself atheist and want to stop all that. That's a mental condition, and we'll get to talk about that some other time. But you follow what I'm saying. This woman from this foreign place who has grown up with her foreign God, because she's a grown up now, She's grown up with her foreign gods. She loves the customs that they have. And those customs may seem very innocent, right, to that person, because why would anybody think bowing to an idol in their living room is a weird thing or a bad thing if they grew up doing it when you're watching mom and dad do it, and they grew up being taught how wonderful that stick in their living room is, or that stone in the den is, and oh, wonderful stone and stick, they wouldn't think that that was weird. They would have a very hard time seeing that as strange, seeing that as evil, because it is evil according to God, but they would have a very hard time seeing that as evil. And there are people in this world today that have a very hard time seeing that as evil, because they grow up in a place, China for instance, where that is normal and desirable to these families, right? And Americans are not immune to this. Americans have this all around them. Everywhere you look, you see people who say they love God having Halloween parties, dressing up for Halloween. Oh, well, I dressed up like Moses. And herein lies the rub. It's not what it means to me. That's what everybody says to me. That's not what it means to me. And I have to respectfully say, retort, whatever the word is. This seems like a crude word for it. But I must respectfully reply, it will not matter what it means to you, what it meant to you. None of that's going to stand in the face of God. It only matters, what does it mean to God? Well, obviously it means something, because he said no. No, no, no. And God doesn't change. He didn't change just because he got another man's wife pregnant and they had a kid who died on a cross, right? No, that's the foundation of Christian doctrine today. It didn't used to be. That wasn't the Christian doctrine of 100 years ago, but it is the Christian doctrine of today. In a nutshell, as offensive as it may sound, it is Christian doctrine in a nutshell. So we have an issue here. And the issue is we're on shaky ground. Why? Because we went off and married women from the other land? Not so much. It's because we're men from the other land. See, this religion wasn't set up for Americans. It wasn't set up for Europeans. It wasn't. This book was set up for the children of God from Mesopotamia. And everybody who wants to be a part of that can be a part of that. But we have some strange situations that come up that, frankly, the Bible does not tell us what to do about. Because we come up in a world where we were worshiping baby Jesus. We had idols all over our house at one time. I had a thing I called a duck. What was that? Like a crane or something that, hand carved out of wood that we bought somewhere. And I called it my duck. And I was very proud of my duck. And we had things like that all over our house. And we weren't saying, oh, great duck. Oh, powerful duck, right? So we didn't see that as idol worship. But owning that was, in fact, idol worship. Why? Because God said so. Well, why did he say so? I don't know. I'm not God. I can't get into the mind of God. I don't understand why there's this push for I won't do anything God says unless I understand it. Why not do things that God says, and if the understanding comes, great, and if it doesn't, hey, what's wrong with being obedient? I don't know. I don't understand that. I used to have a problem with it, and now I can't remember why. But we're coming from, with both of us having this problem. We're the people from the other land. Here it's talking about a man finding a woman. Well, what about the young women looking for men? And I'm talking about that. I mean, we're both from the other, the men and the women of this congregation are from the other side of that equation. All of us are from the other side of that equation, and it's not being very clear on this. But anyway, let's look at what it is saying, and maybe we can find a way to figure out where we fall in all of this. So they're unfaithful. You understand they're not talking about being unfaithful to each other, not even in your mind. They're talking about people who are not living according to the Torah. That's unfaithful. That's the only thing that existed in their world. You were either faithful, which meant you lived by the Torah, or you were unfaithful, which meant you didn't. Well, it's obvious if you're going into a place that's never seen or heard of the Torah, you're going to a place that's unfaithful. And if you're going to intermarry with these people, you are in a dangerous, potentially dangerous situation, in that person may just say, okay, I'll live, according to your ways. And, 10 days later, 10 months later, 10 years later, you find that they've been worshiping an idol in the closet all the time, this whole time. And we've seen this over the years, the situation where the man, and I'm talking about somebody that I actually know, he's from Texas, so that you guys know that it's none of you. But he and his wife were going to church. He stumbled onto our little Friday night meetings. At the time, we were doing Friday night instead of Saturday morning. And he took the methodology and began to become a translator, and we developed a really good relationship. And the longer he stayed with it, the more he gave in to the Judaism. He grew the beard, he started celebrating the holidays, and eventually he wanted to separate from the Christianity altogether. But his wife had just had their first child, and she wasn't having any of that. Under no circumstances was she going to give up Christianity. See, she had been raised in that. Her uncle was the pastor of the church they were a part of at the time, and the answer was no. And divorce was on the line. So their compromise was, okay, let's leave your uncle's church and go to a different church. And let me worship God my way, and you worship God your way, and we'll raise our child being, going both ways, basically. We'll raise our child on the fence post is what we'll do, because that's what you're doing, or what they're doing. He's not a part of this anymore because he had to make that compromise. Their day of rest is Sunday. For the most part, he's just gone back to Christianity. Just almost altogether. Maybe at this point is altogether just going Christianity. But hey, it saved their marriage. Do you see what we're talking about now? This is a potential disaster. So they're being warned. You're facing a situation that is not just going to affect you. It's going to affect your children, your children's children, for generations. This is a very serious issue here. So, because back in this time frame, let's talk about something else I think is important. People did not marry for love. See, that's a Hollywood thing. It's all about let's marry for love. Yeah, that didn't work out real well for the Hollywood crowd, did it? Just saying. They're the biggest hypocrites on the planet when it comes to marrying for love. And everybody's still believing in all that because they just inundate people with their movies about people marrying for love. You know what? When you're 20 years old, you don't know what love is, period. There are people that are 50 years old, 60, 70 years old that will never know what love is. So we got an issue here, marrying for love. Just saying. That's not why they got married. They got married and then they fell in love. Because that's what's going to happen. When you meet somebody, you get all the Google feelings and all that. Google. gushy feelings or whatever you call it. That's what we call infatuation. And yes, that can lead to love. And people who are born and raised in loving homes, they recognize love. Now, is it a deep, long-lasting love when they're dating someone they've only known for 6 weeks, 6 months? No. That kind of love takes time. Love is something that grows over time. And it takes a lot of time for it to become something deep and meaningful. You don't get that up front. And I know there are people that will argue with me, but it don't work that way. And in God's world, it was set up to work the way love really does work. Let your parents pick out the mate that's going to fit. You got to have the same religion. You have to have the same religion because one of you is going to have to cave in to the other. Or you're going to have two religions in your home, and we're kind of being forbidden for that. This is a hard place to be. And God's saying, don't get in it. Well, what if you came from it? Right? I mean, there's a little bit of talk of this in the New Testament letters because they were dealing with people who were from the they were the dwellers in the land like us. But there's not a lot of information there that will help us out, especially if you're reading it from a Christian Bible. So anyway, we're looking at they're not Torah observant, they're unfaithful. This is Vet Notav, the daughters from that place, the dwellers. Then it says Achere, and they go after Eloheihin, their gods. So maybe they started off going after your God, and now they're going after their others. Maybe they didn't. Maybe they've been going after their other gods from the beginning. This, like I said, it nearly drove Solomon crazy. And he's called the wisest man in the world that ever lived, I think. All right, then it's Vehi Zenu. And this causes unfaithfulness. They're going after their gods, and this has the potential to cause unfaithfulness. Not in the marriage, you understand. I suppose there's that possibility, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about Torah observance. This can cause unfaithfulness. Their unfaithfulness can cause, it says, et baneha, your son's unfaithfulness. It can cause you to do like that guy from Texas I'm talking about. He's unfaithful now. He followed after her God. You see what I'm saying? He did exactly what this verse is telling us not to do. And then it says, Hare, that's the word after Elohim, so he's going after their gods. So this is some pretty serious stuff. The translation, and you take wives for your sons from their daughters, and their daughters being unfaithful cause your sons to be unfaithful with them. It's saying that their daughter's unfaithfulness is what causes the sons to become unfaithful. Yes, it can be a thing like, I'm going to divorce you and take the child with me if you don't go to my church with me, which was very much the case. Or it can be just like Solomon. He's just trying to keep the peace in the house. And the next thing you know, he's bowing down to the idols in his house right beside her. I mean, it could be all kinds of things, right? And maybe he likes the traditions that this woman has. Maybe he's like, well, their God doesn't mean anything to me. I'm okay with the tree in the corner and putting the lights on. It's very festive, and we need to be festive. It's all kinds of things, but you start off a marriage with compromise of your beliefs. I don't think you're in a good place. So at this point, we're going to change gears, right? Because now it's going to go back to laws that have already been given, because they're being given as examples here. Here's where I'm thinking that I need to involve the group, because I believe that one of the things that has really been lost in Judaism is the festivity, the pomp and the circumstance, if you will. I don't know what to call it. But when we had a temple in Jerusalem, we knew how to party. We knew how to put on a show. We knew how to draw people in from all over the world, our known world, that wanted to come and be a part of the festivities. It was something fun. They danced go down to the river and get your water, and you have your water pots, and you're dancing all the way up the hill back to the temple, and the trumpets are playing, 250 or so trumpet players with the drummers and whoever else they had, and the guitar players. Well, if I say lyre, you'll think it's a guitar type instrument. They had all these instruments playing. They had the choir singing, and they had the massive lights. I mean, their lights were 70 feet tall, by the way. Yeah, they were huge. And of course, not that they didn't burn them every night, but it wasn't like Christmas lights, but they had lights. I mean, it's probably where the whole idea for Christmas lights comes from, is because, boy, did these people know how to light a place up. But you had the lights, you had the pageantry. They would go in and they would literally fix the roads, even though the Romans should have been doing it. They were going in and fixing the roads, and they were cleaning up the cemeteries and painting the tombstones and painting their places and doing the landscaping. I mean, they really knew how to get into it and get everybody in the mindset and all that, right? We lose our temple and we're the most boring people on the planet, right? So I think that there needs to be some kind of pageantry like there used to be. We don't have to have a temple for that. But here's the problem, and here's the tendency. The tendency is going to be for us to start making excuses as to why we should have lights, why we should have Christmas presents, why we should have Christmas trees, that's going to be the tendency, why we should be getting together for Christmas. That's wrong, and that's sin, according to the verses that we've been going through for the past few weeks. But, and I shouldn't say but, that's probably the wrong segue. I can't think of anything else, so I'll go with that. But what we're looking for is, what can we do? We don't have a temple. I've tried to get people to come to the synagogue for Hanukkah and fix it up and stuff like that, and virtually nobody shows up. Well, now we're internet based instead of building based. Someone's gonna have to come up with something pretty clever for us to find some way to have pageantry over the internet. How are we gonna decorate the internet? I don't know. Somebody may think of something, but I'm not coming up with anything. But there's got to be some traditions. Donna thought of one that's good, but we don't want to make it, as she said, we don't want to build this whole thing around food, right? But one of the things that Donna likes to do is make sugar cookies. And we've got these molds of Star of David and what else? I know the Star of David. Oh yeah, and the menorah and stuff like that. We have the ones with all the Jewish stuff, and she makes the sugar cookies and lets the kids decorate them. Well, and that's great. Those kids will grow up thinking that's great, and they'll share that with their children, and that'll be a great thing to pass on, right? One of the traditions that my mother passed on to me, that I passed on to my children, I passed it on to my children because it was something I loved as a child. She passed it down to us because necessity was the mother of invention. We were very poor. And when mother would go to the store once a month, she couldn't afford to take all of the children with her and buy them all a snack, an ice cream cone or something. We were too poor for that. And so she would take one of us with her and swear us to secrecy. You can never tell the other one. This is just our secret. And I'll never forget the moment that three of us realized she was doing that. We all thought we were the only one. Fourth one was too young to have experienced it at that point, but we got a big laugh out of it because we all actually thought we were the only ones she did that with, and she was doing that with every one of us. So I did that with my kids. When we would go somewhere and I would take just one of them, they would get a special treat, and I'd swear them to secrecy, but I always made sure the other ones knew. So it was the worst kept secret on the planet, but it was something fun for us to do. And they're doing that with their kids. We need things like that. We need something fun, but we got to get away from the food thing, or we're all going to be the 600 to 1,000 pound roly polies before it's over with. So we got to think of things that we can do that will be fun, that we're not trying to copy off of somebody else or get confused. Because here's the thing the problem I have with lights. I don't care if they're all blue and white, because that's what some people do. It's all blue and white, so that makes it okay. No, you know why? Because the Jews are the only ones that know that blue and white belongs to Judaism. Right? So other people drive down the road and they see your house all decorated in lights and all that, and they think you're celebrating Christmas. And I think that crosses the line. In fact, I'll bet everything I know about Torah on it that crosses the line. So we can't have lights. Well, I'm sorry. It is what it is. I didn't start this. I didn't cause this. Please don't blame me. But yeah, I would say we can't, because you basically can't do that without it being Christmassy. Now, if you find some way to make it not Christmassy, you just remember that if you cross the line, you're the one that crossed it. And I warned you. I don't think it's a good idea, because I tried that one year, and yeah, somebody said, "Oh, look, you got your Christmas decorations up." That's all it took for me. So we don't do that. Do we get together and have meals with our family? I don't, because I think that you're this close. I don't know if you can see that, but you're within a hair of crossing a line that you can't come back from. For one thing, there's a message being sent to your friends who are not faithful. You're saying there is merit in your religion, and we're not allowed to give merit to other religions. That's against God's law. And I think I've talked you through at least 2 laws that said, that took us down that road. We cannot do things that give them merit. Let me give you some examples of idol worship that I learned the hard way. I went to a doctor's office, and I sat down, and I noticed that there was a little statue of Buddha sitting there. So I was really struggling over, should I see this doctor who has a Buddha in his office? It was a little bitty one, but it was right there, plain sight. Or should I go on down the road? Now, a very dear friend of mine, a scholar of the utmost, is the one that introduced me to this doctor and just raved about how great he was, and he could get me pain-free in no time with my spine, because that's what this doctor did for him. So I'm sitting there really struggling over, I don't think I should be here. And then a woman comes in. She's obviously suffering from cancer. She's got the hat thing, the scarf thing on her head, and she's very skinny and not doing very well. And she's in there with her daughter, And her daughter asked her about the Buddha, and before I know it, the two of them were praying to that thing right in front of me. So I waited till they got back up off their knees and got through rubbing the little belly and all that kind of stuff. And I got up and I walked out just as they were calling my name. And I thought, wow. It was a very creepy experience, for one thing. I knew I'd walked into the wrong place. I knew I was in the devil's den, yet I wrestled with it. Because that Buddha didn't mean anything to me. I wasn't going to pray to it. And so shortly, short time later, we walk into a restaurant and there's a giant Buddha in the door. Well, people, this was the best Chinese restaurant in the Americas. And all my friends swore by this place. So we go in, we sit down, and we eat, and it is, without a doubt, the best Chinese you'd ever eaten in your life. I mean, it was so good, they had to roll you out of the building because you way overate. It was so good. But it bothered me. It was still bothering me the whole time. And finally, the third or fourth time we went to this place, right in front of us, a mother was showing her child that here you put a dollar bill here and then you rub on its belly, and right in front of me. Right in front of me. And that's when I realized, wow, we have really made a mistake here. So I was trying to express to somebody why I felt like we shouldn't be eating there. They got all beside themselves mad at me because it was their favorite restaurant. And that Buddha didn't mean a dadgum thing to them. They weren't giving it any money and they weren't praying to it and blah, blah, blah. By they, it's one guy. But anyway, another Texan because it's in Austin. But part of the explanation of idol worship is in the Gesenius. You can look it up if you like. It says that your how does it say it? It was right there in my head, jumped out just now. You're advancing the religion itself. You're advancing the teachings and the religion of this idol by, when you make a purchase in that place, by us giving money, paying for our food, that food advanced the ability for that religion to be forwarded onto unsuspecting Americans who would go in there and rub the belly and pray to that thing. We help to make that happen by doing business with that company. So that's the very definition of idol worship. So at that point, I realized we can't do this anymore. Well, that guy got real mad at me, and I was like, I wasn't telling you not to. I'm telling you that it is a sin by God's law, and this is why. But if you're going to do it, you're going to do it. You don't have to get mad at me because I'm not going to do it. I don't understand that. Why does everybody get mad at me? Why do you get mad at me if I tell you that this is what God's law says? I didn't write the law. I'm just telling you what it says. Okay, so let's stop getting mad at Rob over this. But because I keep going through this, people keep getting mad at me about it. Well, I didn't make the law. I just live by it, and I don't have a problem with it. If I can't eat there, I can't eat there. There's a Chinese restaurant right here in our town. It's kind of funny. I walked in, and of course, they have a hostess that wants to seat you, and she says, "For what?" And I said, "No, just a minute." And I went all around looking around. Of course, they were all freaked out. I guess they probably thought I was a food inspector. I thought about it after I did what I did, but I was looking to see if there were any idols anywhere, and there were not. So we eat there from time to time. But I made sure that there were no idols in there for us to have to deal with, because we're not advancing that religion by eating there, because there are no idols there. There's no pictures there. There's nothing there about the religion. They do have pictures of China, but that's not a religion. That's a place. Anyway, what are some other things? But you got to ask yourself if what you're doing helps to advance an idol, the teaching of and the continuation of an idol. If you're helping to advance that, you are in fact worshiping an idol. So when you go to a Christmas dinner, you are advancing that idea that this is okay, because they're looking to us to be, are you going to be okay with this? Are you not going to be okay with this? And if we go to this dinner, the work dinners are the easiest examples that we can give you. Most people work at a place that almost always where you work, they have a Christmas dinner, right? Well, we don't go to those, because that's us basically saying to them, your religion has merit. We're not allowed to do that. So we don't do that with our businesses, and we don't do that with our families either. It's why we don't go and get together with our family during the Christmas season. We just simply don't do it. That's Don and I. Now, I'm not telling you guys what you can and cannot do, but I will say that if you do that, you are going to cross a line, because you don't know, for one thing, what's going on in their mind. You don't know when they're going to show up with their Christmas sweatshirt on, their Merry Christmas shirt. You don't know when they're going to walk in the door with the Christmas presents. You don't know those things. So you don't have them in your home. You don't go to them in someone else's home. If you do that, you are committing a sin by God's law. Now, please don't get mad at me about that. It just is what it is. God's saying no. And this whole passage connects to all of this. Go back and watch the videos if you like. It'll help you to see it maybe more clearly, I would hope. Maybe not. I may not be that good of a teacher, but I hope that I got some of that across. I wasn't thinking of it in those terms, so maybe I didn't. But anyway, we can't do it. We can't have molten gods, as in verse 17. We can't have the trees. That's also in the Bible. The chopping down of the trees and the decorating it with silver and gold. That's in the Bible, people. It says we can't do it. The whole thing about the lights, the presents, the baby Jesus, the whole thing. We can't have any part of any of that stuff. And when we do, we break God's law. Are we going to hell for it? No. Remember, this is God's law, and in God's law, there's only one thing that can send you to hell. These are not heaven and hell issues, but they are marginalization issues. When we marginalize God by saying it's not that big of a deal, God doesn't care, God knows my heart, we're marginalizing God. And that's pushing real close to the one thing that will keep you out of heaven. It really is. It isn't the thing, but it can certainly push you across that line. So let's hope that no one does that. But anyway, getting into 17, this is God's molten, not you shall do to you. You know what's going on. It's the gods. Remember, this is Elohe, so this is the plural of majesty. It's not really God. It's more about hero, to be majestic, to be a great general, that sort of thing. But they use it, it's most often translated as God. This says Masacha, molten, so you can't have you can't have molten gods. Ta'aseh, so you won't make them. I guess it's not saying you can't have them, it's saying you can't make them. Laha, for yourself. So the translation, you shall not make molten gods for yourselves. Now, if you compare that, you can compare that to something we've already had. It was in chapter 20, verse 4. You shall not make for yourself a 3D image in the semblance of anything that flies in the air above, that, and I added the walks, crawls, or slithers, because that's what they're actually trying to get across, on the land below, or anything that, and I added this, that walks, crawls, or slithers, or swims. Then it says, in the waters beneath the land. Again, that's Exodus chapter 20, verse 4. Chapter 20, verse 4 is the law. 34:17, the one we just read, is detailed information on how to follow that law. If you don't make it, you won't be bowing down to it. Even Ezra felt that the word molten was added to remind the Yehudim of the molten calf. I kind of doubt that, but it is a possibility, so I'm not going to argue against it. And he's going to get into the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which this is another one that's just way too big. But to sum up this whole thing, I think that we as a group need to find some way to find festivity, find tradition, whether they're... the problem I have with a lot of Jewish tradition is that it comes out of the Dark Ages, and it was designed to keep people from breaking laws that weren't even from the Bible. So that bothers me. I don't look to those traditions. But there are traditions that are not bad. I mean, the food traditions I tend to like. I like the foods that we make for the holiday, for the Hanukkah holiday, for the Passover and stuff like that, that are not biblically based, but they go well with the food that are biblically based, if you will. But Hanukkah is not a biblical holiday. It is one worth celebrating. I'll give you that. And I've argued in times past that Hanukkah has been celebrated by Jews since Sinai. If you haven't seen that one, go look it up. It's somewhere on the internet. I don't remember what it was called, but probably Hanukkah for Christians or Hanukkah for the uninitiated, or Hanukkah, I'm sure, is in the name somewhere. But I think there's a good argument for it starting at Sinai. But it's about the dedication of the temple. And celebrating the dedication of the temple is to celebrate God's children winning battles that they couldn't possibly have won. And so it's given the glory to God. And I think that's a good thing to celebrate. Just like I think the 4th of July is a good thing to celebrate, even though it has nothing to do with God. So anyway, I think that we need to think about ways to be festive, to have a good time, to have get-togethers. I don't think necessarily having gifts is a bad thing. Certainly, I've always allowed that for the children, because little children cannot understand why everybody else around them are getting all kinds of gifts and they're not. I'm sorry, they can't. And you know it as well as I do. So I don't tell people don't do it. Now, I tell them don't buy Santa Claus Christmas wrapping and elfin stuff and things to false gods like the Ice Queen and what's that ice movie, and stuff from Walt Disney and places like... don't do that. It can be something with pretty patterns on it. It can be something with pictures of animals on it. The law is against things that are three-dimensional, not things that are pictures. So that's not the issue. But if it's pictures of things that are worshipped and things that are magical, yeah, there are laws against that. So don't do that. But and I don't see anything wrong with giving gifts. Families giving gifts, husbands and wives to each other and to their children. I don't see a problem with that until we start doing it where it can be construed as Christmas. I don't know what to tell you. It's wrong. The idea of giving gifts is not wrong. But the idea of what we're doing being construed as Christmas, that is wrong. We are crossing a line there. I don't know what to do at this point. So I want to open it up to discussion. I want for you guys to come up with ideas, not ideas on how we can have Christmas. We all know that's wrong. But ideas on what we can do so that our kids will look back on these times and say, "Oh, that was some of the most fun I ever had in my life." So that they'll pass on these great traditions that we come up with. Maybe we have to go and look at older Judaism, maybe not so much the stuff from the Dark Ages, but let's go back and see what they did. Because there was a time when they didn't have a temple. They must have done something fun, right? Hey, this could be a great homework assignment for us all. I know I'm going to look. And let's see what we can do to find a way to make this fun. To find a way to come up with traditions that we want to pass on to our children. Traditions that we know do not violate God's law. That's all I'm asking. Shalom and shalom, y'all.